Hey guys, welcome back. So what a crazy few days it's been in the stock market, am I right? Well, I haven't been sitting idle, I've actually been making some moves, and as you can tell by the title of this video, I made one huge move today, and recently I've been also making some smaller moves, which I will talk about as well in this video. So I'm going to be talking about what did I buy, what did I sell, and the reasons why I did each move. So it's going to be a really fun video, lots to talk about, so let's jump in. So first, let me go through some of the smaller moves I made in my portfolio before we get to the meat and potatoes of today's video. So first, I did decide to sell out of my entire position of Disney. Now, this was one of my smallest positions. I only had about 8 shares, so this wasn't a big position anyways. But I did decide to sell out of it just because I think that some things have changed when it came to Disney since I bought the stock back in 2019, and not all of the things are good. Now, all in all, I sold at pretty much break even, so my cost basis on it was at like 133, I think. So I made about like $2 a share. I sold at like 135. So I made nothing on this trade basically. But what do I mean by things have changed though? Well, obviously it's because of the Roni situation mainly. Everything from their theme parks to their movie releases are being just delayed or closed or things like that. And also Disney's latest released movie, Mulan, has received quite a bit of controversy. And I'm not going to get into the meat of the controversy just because we don't talk about politics on this channel and people get riled up from politics, so I'm not gonna talk about it because I don't want to get demonetized. But essentially, yeah, I don't really like it. Let's just say when companies that are not supposed to be involved in politics get involved in politics, and this is usually bad news for the stock when that happens. And this can put a lot of downwards pressure on the company. And the thing is, I don't see these controversies going away anytime soon. If anything, for Disney, it's gonna get a lot worse before it gets better. So I think in the medium term, this will put a lot of downwards pressure on the stock, obviously. And I know I made a video recently talking about how I think that Disney is going to do well in the long term, and that remains to be true. And I still believe that Disney will survive, and it's not like they're going to go bankrupt or anything like that. They're still going to do well in the long term. That's what I still believe. But I think in the short to medium term, yeah, there might be better places to put my money in the meantime, which is why I sold my Disney shares. Now, talking about in the meantime, I used my money that I got from the sale of my Disney shares to buy 100 shares of Tapestry, ticker symbol TPR. Now, I talked about Tapestry in a previous video, and you know, in case you don't know what they do, they own a bunch of famous fashion brands like Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman. So in the previous video, I said that this was a really attractive buy at this point just because of their valuations. Now currently the forward PE of Tapestry is sitting at less than 7, and the price to sales ratio is also below 1. So today it pulled back another 3%. So I think that it was time for me to pull the trigger on this one. So I do put my money where my mouth is, by the way, as you can see. So anyways, those are my smaller moves, and I'm not going to waste too much more time talking about those smaller moves. Let's get into the big move that I made. And the big move that I made, and the fun one, is my purchase of call options for Slack Technologies, ticker symbol WORK. Now let me show you the position first, and you can see that I bought 2 contracts, which is 200 options, with an average price of $7 per option. So if you do the math, this is a $1,400 position, and those are all US dollars, by the way. So, you know, these are pretty long dated options, and they don't expire until January 21st, 2022. So I got quite a bit of time on those, and the strike price is $27. Now, if you're wondering why the interface looks so different, it's because I'm using Questrade, which is another brokerage. So basically, long story short, I had this long fight with RBC, and they wouldn't let me enable options trading on my account for the longest time, and it took them like basically more than a year of like back and forth. And I just got frustrated, so I just opened up a Questrade account, and it was actually really smooth and really easy, and I was granted the permission to trade options right away on Questrade. I'm not sponsored by Questrade, by the way, I'm just telling you my first-hand experience. Now anyways, in all fairness, I was eventually granted the permission to trade options on my RBC account, so I can now trade options on my RBC Direct Investing, but at that point, you know, this was a few months ago where I was granted permission on RBC, and at that point I had already opened up my Questrade account. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do all my options with Questrade now. and their fees are, I think, a little lower anyways. So going forward, I think I'm just going to use my Questrade as my fun account, and I'm going to use it for like options bets or really highly speculative bets. So yeah, it's going to be like the fun car that you take on a weekend, right? Except I have a fun investment account. Yeah, that's the type of person I am. But anyways, yeah, that's how you know I have like no life. So anyways, if you look at my position very carefully, you can see that like 76% of my entire portfolio is in this one position. Now, I'm not that much of a baller, guys. As I said, I don't have that much money in this account just because it's like a fun account. It's not one of my main accounts. So yeah, that's why it says 76% of my entire portfolio is in there. I'm not that much of a baller, don't worry. I wouldn't put like 76% of my entire portfolio in like one risky options bet. So anyways, moving on. Let's talk about why I decided to buy Slack call options. And why did I buy options instead of shares? So first, let me explain what Slack is for those who might not be entirely familiar. So if you haven't heard of Slack, basically they're this communication software tool for businesses. So they mainly target workplaces and like startups and smaller businesses. And you know, it's really meant to be a replacement for email. It's meant to be a lot faster and smoother way to collaborate with coworkers rather than emailing them back and forth. So it's kind of like instant messaging and emailing and voice and video conferencing all rolled into one. So it's kind of multi-platform too, so you can use it on anything. You can use it on iOS or Android, on Mac OS or Windows. So I think the reason why Slack is interesting is because I use it on a daily basis for work. So as some of you know, I work for Wealthsimple, and at Wealthsimple, Slack is our primary means of communication. So, you know, even before I joined Wealthsimple, I was working at a startup, the one that I got fired from. So yeah, I was working at that startup, and back when I was working at the startup, Slack was also the primary means of communication at that startup. And you know, I have a lot of experience using Slack, but I've also used Slack's main competitor, which is Microsoft Teams, when I was working at a previous job, namely the one at Loblaw. So personally, I gotta say, having used both Team and Slack, I do prefer Slack a lot more. Now, you guys know that I'm a Microsoft shareholder, so I'm not doing myself any favors by admitting that Slack is better than Teams, that I prefer Slack. But, you know, quite frankly, I gotta tell you guys the truth, and the truth is I do prefer using Slack. So it just feels more intuitive, and it just feels a lot better for me. It's hard for me to explain, but I know this is a bit subjective, but I think a lot of people will agree with me that I think Slack is just better. So taking a look at Slack's revenue growth, you can see that they're putting up some massive numbers. Now, according to Seeking Alpha, they stand about 50% year-over-year revenue growth. Now, I don't know what other companies that Seeking Alpha is comparing them to say that the sector median is only like 5%. That seems a bit janky to me. Just ignore that part. But looking at the 5-year average, it's an even more insane number, right? So moving on to profitability, we can see that this is another area where the company shines. So it's putting up a gross margin of 86%. And this is what I love about software businesses, because with software, your cost of revenue, it doesn't really go up that much as your business scales. So the simplest way I can explain it is, if you're Apple and you're making, let's say, iPads, and 1,000 people is interested in buying an iPad, well, then you got to manufacture 1,000 iPads more, right? So if 1,000 people want to use Slack and they want to join Slack, well, then all you have to do is issue 1,000 new licenses, and it costs you like nothing to issue new licenses. So that's what I love about software. It's like really scalable, right? So you can essentially just issue like an infinite number of like licenses. Well, you can't actually issue infinite numbers of licenses because eventually you're gonna have to upgrade your servers and stuff like that. But like, you guys get what I mean, right? You can issue a lot of licenses and it won't necessarily cost you a lot more, versus if you had to all of a sudden manufacture like 1 million iPads, well, then that's gonna bring up your cost of revenue a lot more. So yeah, that's what I love about software, and Slack is like the perfect example of a high margin software company. Also, I just got to point out, I know at first that it does seem like Slack is trading at a really high valuation, but if you just look at Slack compared to similar companies in the tech space, you can see that the price to sales ratio is actually the lowest in the bunch. Now, not every company can grow their revenue by like 50% year over year, so this isn't a Coca-Cola, okay? We're not talking about like a value play, we're not talking about like a dividend pair, we're talking about like the purest form of what you would consider a high growth company, right? So this is like just a prime example of growth investing if you buy Slack stock, or if you take up a position in Slack like I did. So yeah, this is just pure growth investing, and obviously they're not going to pay out dividends or anything like that anytime soon, right? Don't confuse this with like your boring old businesses like a Coca-Cola or Pepsi or something like that. This is a company that's growing revenues like by an insane margin. Now, last question that I will inevitably get is, why did you buy calls instead of shares? And the answer to this is very simple, and the answer is leverage. So recall, I spent about $1,400 for 2 contracts, which controls 200 shares. Now, if I were to actually buy 200 shares of Slack, the stock is around $25.25 right now. So if you do the math, I would have had to spend like $5,000 to buy 200 shares. Now, those are US dollars too, by the way. So if you convert that to Canadian, that would be about 7,500 Canadian dollars-ish, if I'm doing my math right. So quite frankly, I didn't want to put up that much amount of money up front. So, $7,500, it might not be a lot to you guys, but it's a lot of money to me, okay? So, to put $7,500 at once into one position, that's a really, really big commitment for me. And even for a company like Slack, where I do think that is kind of undervalued for what it is, even for a company like Slack, that's kind of risky, right? I don't want to spend that much money. So, I would rather put up $1,400 US dollars than to put up like $5,000 US dollars at once. So it just puts less of a ding on my cash balance when I buy calls instead of the shares. And these are really long dated calls, by the way. So as I said, these don't expire until January 2022. So, I got time. So anyways, with calls, I'm able to bet big on Slack without breaking the bank. And if I'm right, and I hope I am, I'll make a decent profit on this trade, hopefully. So anyways, that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and be sure to give a like if you enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe if you like the series, and be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, links down below in the description as always. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.